Hey, this is episode 104 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. Joining me today, Professor Eric Segall will recap what happened at the Supreme Court yesterday with arguments about whether or not we're ever going to be able to see Donald Trump's taxes. Then I go to Jeff Jarvis, who is a journalism professor and media critic, and talk about a whole range of issues. Always great with Jeff Jarvis. And I invited a couple of subscribers on to talk about how they lost loved ones to conspiracies. I'm Pete Dominic. I'm a male model. Stand up with me right now. All right, I'm not a male model. I've never modeled for anything, but I think that's got to be probably one of the best jobs ever, modeling. Be right? I mean, isn't that a pretty cool thing to be able to just take pictures and get paid for it? You know what else is a really cool thing? Talking and getting paid for it. Thank you very much for subscribing, ladies and gentlemen, to the Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I have a lot to say here at the top, and I probably shouldn't. Probably should just get right to the guest, throw to both Eric Segall, Jeff Jarvis, and the two listeners that I talked to about losing their loved ones to conspiracies. But there's a lot that's been going on, and I feel like in terms of listeners and subscribers, and I kind of want to tell you how the show is bringing people together and how awesome that feels and how great that is. I got a email from my friend Doug in Wyoming, who's an amazing guy. Doug and his wife Eliza out in Wyoming. They're just awesome human beings, and I've been talking to them for years. Never met them, but we have been exchanging emails and pictures and family stories for years. And Doug and I have gotten pretty close. I talked to him on the phone for an hour a couple of weeks ago, and I really liked the guy. And he was listening to the show when my 100th episode, and I talked to Tom and Leslie of Noble Pies. NoblePies.com. Get all your pies at Noble Pies. And it resonated with him when they were talking about the idea of comfort pies, dinner pies, like chicken pot pies, etc. They make all kinds of great comfort pies, as they call them. Doug was reminded by the idea that he and his wife will get together with their family, or rather with their daughter that lives like 80 miles away, and they really miss their daughter and just seeing her, and they would have pie together at Perkins, and it reminded him of that. And so I sent that to Leslie, Doug's email, and she was moved beyond words by it, and it was just great connecting Doug with Leslie and Tom. Then I have a listener, Mark, who is an awesome, really smart guy who has a new company starting up. Connect with another listener, Dustin, who has a branding company, Triskele, and he can brand any of your if you want cups, if you want jackets embroidered with your logo, name brand luggage and jackets, whatever you want, he'll embroider or put your logo on all that. It's a really cool guy. Connecting Dustin with Mark to other listeners is an amazing, awesome thing. What I'm trying to say is we've created an amazing community. And that's why I had to do this podcast, because after SiriusXM let me go, I couldn't let that community go. We've added so many new people to it, but so many of you have come along with me to the podcast. And now that it's daily, I hear from you daily, and it is so valuable to me. Sorry, I've been drinking Evan Williams whiskey. It's the cheapest whiskey I could find, and Coke. I bought Coke, which is something I haven't done in a couple of years. I bought soda, sugar, Coke, like the legit Coke, and I mix it, and I have a drink, and then I record this intro, and it's probably not the smartest idea, but I mentioned last Friday on this show to Christian Finnegan that I just couldn't bear spending like $30 on even Jack Daniels. And then another listener reached out to me and told me that it was just too much for him to hear that I was drinking such cheap whiskey. And guess what, guys? This guy emails me, Zach, and basically tells me that I need to go to my local liquor store where he has a gift certificate waiting for me from Zach. There's a gift certificate to my local liquor store. He's insisting I buy a certain kind of whiskey. He was so horrified that I was drinking cheap. Listen to me. I'm hammered. Drinking cheap whiskey that he bought me. He's buying me a bottle. And Zach, I'm looking forward looking forward to having I can't speak. Looking forward to having my first glass of that expensive whiskey with you over Zoom. Longtime listener, current subscriber on Patreon. Typically, I would send you a Facebook message. I really don't like that platform. Thank you. Don't send me Facebook messages. Just email me or DM me on Twitter. Best way. And if you got my number, just text me. He said, I want to reach out to you on very critical issues. Friday's show, you mentioned upgrading from Evan Williams to Jack Daniels as your over-ice whiskey choice. Now, I know you drink Bud Light beer, so I wasn't terribly shocked by this choice. However, I think you can do better starting now. Very soon, you will be receiving a gift certificate. And then he mentions he looked up the liquor store near where I live. Yeah, if anybody wants to buy me liquor, Conger's Wine and Liquor. He looked it up. That's fantastic. All right, so thank you to all the listeners for your contributions and all of your messages, by the way, on Patreon. I'm getting all of your messages. It's a little bit overwhelming in that I can't get back to all of them, or I'll never be able to get the podcast out the door every day. I do want to mention one specific email that I got from, I think it's Judy. And yesterday, I had Judy M says, great podcast, Pete, on a comment. And I thank you, Judy. But yesterday, I had a veterinarian on the show, and she's amazing. Her name is Danielle Trapani, rather. I got it wrong again, Danielle. And we talked about veterinary medicine, being a veterinarian, and especially during this pandemic. And it was very interesting. And I really enjoyed talking with her and got a lot of great feedback. So this other listener apparently is also a veterinarian. And Jennifer, that's her name, Jennifer. There you are, Jennifer, who wrote to me this message on Patreon, Jennifer, was all I needed. It filled my cup. She wrote, hi, Pete. Terrible show as always. Thanks for talking to a veterinarian about our struggles in this new normal. I'm sure she and I are not the only ones that listen to your show. We're a pretty smart bunch. She's also a veterinarian and says, I'm a little offended I don't get to be your official veterinarian, but I digress. And she went on, Jennifer, you can also be the official veterinarian. You and Danielle can join me, and I'm sure we would have a thoughtful conversation. At the end of this thoughtful message, where she writes about a whole bunch of other issues she wants me to discuss, she says, I hope you and your family, Ferd, my pet, and otherwise, continue to do well. And then she writes, I'll keep listening as long as you keep talking. Jen, when you wrote that, it made me feel so confident and so good about what I'm doing. Every day I question the guests and the interviews and the editing, and that is just going to stay with me. As long as I'll keep listening as long as you keep talking. Jen, thank you. Thank all of you for listening to this podcast, especially for those of you that are paying $5 or more, and many of you are paying a lot more than that for a monthly subscription. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick. We are building an amazing community of people, and we are doing it in a very unique and I think holistic and wholesome way. And I'm going to keep talking to you and keep creating and keep trying to make this show better and keep coming up with ideas to get us together, whether it be in Zoom or in real life, going on tour and interviewing my guests at theaters in your town. I'm not going to stop. I am on fucking fire right now. I care so much about you and this world, and I'm not giving up on it, especially now in the craziest time of our lives. Okay, sorry. Rant over. Let's get to my first guest, Professor Eric Segall, who I talked about latest Supreme Court case arguments about whether or not we're ever going to see Donald Trump's taxes. Right now, Georgia State Law Professor Eric Segall coming up, Jeff Jarvis of the Craig Newmark School of Journalism, and then later, two subscribers and listeners and friends, Derek and then Liam, on the ones that they've lost to QAnon and conspiracy theories. Had great conversations. 4 guests coming up right now. Let's roll, Tim. Eric Segall. Today, we heard arguments at the Supreme Court, and we actually heard them. They were live on audio. We talked about this technological advancement, we could argue, last week. But today's hearing was about something very important, the president's financial records before he was president. Take it away, Eric.
Okay, so these two cases, when they say make a federal case out of something, they usually mean that you've blown it up out of proportion. In one respect, these cases are incredibly important, obviously. In another respect, though, they shouldn't have drawn the attention of the Supreme Court like they did. The District Attorney of New York thinks state and federal crimes were possibly committed. He issued a subpoena to a third party for Trump's financial records before he became president. The House of Representatives of the United States Congress wants those same records to study the issue of what we should require presidents to disclose when they run for office or take office. Those are both legitimate law enforcement, law execution functions. Donald Trump was not a defendant in either of those two cases.
The third party.
Sorry?
The third party is?
Yes. Now, he swooped in. He's allowed to do this. He swooped in and said, don't let the third party disclose those documents. Here's the thing, Pete. We have two major cases on point. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. Richard Nixon secretly recorded his top officials, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Attorney General, in the Oval Office. And when those materials became relevant to a criminal investigation, the Supreme Court said you have to give them up. He said, I'm the president. No, I don't. Supreme Court said, yes, you do. Now, if there's state secrets, if there's, classified information, you got to get rid of those. But the non-state secrets, non-classified information, you have to give those up. That's one case. That case applies here to some degree, except this case is even easier because that case involved official documents.
Right. When he was president.
When he was president. Well, official tape recordings, excuse me. Second case, which is really on point. Paula Jones claims that Bill Clinton, when she refused to give him a blowjob, sorry, but that's what she claims, or claimed, when she refused to give him a blowjob, he retaliated against her in all kinds of employment ways when he was governor of Arkansas. She then filed a civil lawsuit against him. His argument was very clear. I'm not saying she can't sue me. I'm saying she can't sue me now.
And that she has to blow me. I can't get over that. The idea that if it's true, did Bill Clinton really retaliate because a woman wouldn't perform a sexual act on him?
While he was governor of Arkansas, probably. Ooh. Yeah. Well, that wouldn't be out of character with Bill Clinton.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So I thought he should resign at the time when this all came out. But not the Paula Jones thing, the Monica Lewinsky. But anyway, it's very clear to understand precisely what Bill Clinton's argument was. It wasn't you can't sue me ever. It was you can't sue me while I'm president. Because if I have to go to depositions and answer interrogatories, and it's going to take up too much of my time. By a unanimous vote, Justice Breyer wrote a separate opinion, but agreeing with the vote. 9-0. No, President Clinton, you must defend this lawsuit while you're president because the events complained of happened before you were president. If he had been involved in a drunk driving accident a month before his presidency, it'd be the same thing. And they'd say, no, you have no immunity here. You have no executive privilege here. This all happened before you became president.
It's a matter of there being question of your privilege or immunity in terms of the protection you get for being the president of the United States. But if you're president and there's an investigation about an allegation or a crime that you committed allegedly before you became president, that's fair game.
And Pete, let me explain very precisely why the reason for that is, because it's directly relevant to this case. The president cannot be sued ever in a civil action for actions he takes while he's president. That's a controversial decision, but it is a decision of the Supreme Court. Okay. No matter what he does, he can't be sued. The rationale was we don't want presidents to worry about being sued when they make decisions that affect the whole country. We don't want him to worry about that. Do what's best for everybody. Don't worry about lawsuits. So we're going to put you above the law, which that rule does. It puts the president above the law. But it's worth it according to the majority. Okay. But in this case, no decision by Trump is being questioned while he was president. No document he produced while president is being questioned. So the lower courts had a very easy time with this. They were unanimous in both cases. All courts, 4 courts, 4 unanimous decisions, 4 decisions, not unanimous, 4 decisions. Of course, the DA of New York and the House of Representatives gets to see these pre-presidential documents because we live in a country of laws. And
documents which are financial records that are being held by a third party. In this case, I think it's Deutsche Bank or a bank.
Several third parties, Deutsche Bank and his accounting firm and a couple of,
Okay.
But now what the justices were a little bit concerned about today, and I get this, is what happens if 250 district attorneys issue subpoenas against the president? What happens if the House of Representatives issues 27 subpoenas, 50 subpoenas against the president and hound him and harass them? What would we do then? That's a legitimate question. And the answer from the lawyers was the correct answer, the lawyers for New York and for the House of Representatives. And by the way, I should say the lawyer for the House of Representatives, a man named Doug Letter, I worked with for 4 years at the Department of Justice. He's an excellent, excellent man. He is neither, as far as I know, he's neither Republican nor Democrat. He's working for the Democratic House now, but he's just a good guy.
And how did he do? Because how was his performance? I only ask because Dan Abrams was critical of it.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like his. So, by the way, he's argued like 1,000 appellate cases, not Supreme Court cases, but appellate cases. Okay. He was head of the appellate division for the Department of Justice for 30 years. His style, Pete, is very kind of modest and humble. And when someone asks a good question, I like your kid in the background. When
my daughter just walked by. Yeah. Go ahead.
When somebody asks a good question, he says to the justice, "That's a good question, Your Honor." He's ruthlessly honest. Okay. I like that in a litigant. Anyway, what he said was, well, if that happens, if the president is truly harassed by 200 different district attorneys, we'll worry about that then. But that's not today's case. And Your Honors, you shouldn't, if that happens, and the Supreme Court has even said, and the name of the case is going to elude me, but the Supreme Court has said, the possible abuse of a power is not an argument against its existence. And that's always true. So here, the House of Representatives and the District Attorney of New York are just doing their jobs. Now, is there a political motivation here? Maybe. I'm not stupid.
I mean, listen, I just a bit of commentary, just very, very briefly. Mayors and governors and presidents, there should be a law. There isn't, I get it, but there should be a law that makes them have to be transparent with their investment, all their financial records, all their taxes. Everything has to be on the table. If you're a public servant, that doesn't mean the case if we're private citizens, but if you are a public servant, mayor, governor, anybody, president, all of your financial records have to be on the table. And in this case, they're saying for a number of reasons, the president of the United States, we have many reasons to believe this or that. We need to be able to see his financial records. And if he's got nothing to hide, fine.
Well, it's not just him, Pete. So an overlooked part of this case, although the attorney for the district attorney really tried to press this, was that this case involves Trump and others who may have committed crimes. Now, the statute of limitations for these crimes might be able to be told for the president. I'm not sure about that, but maybe. But as the district attorney said, there's no way to toll the statute of limitations for these other alleged wrongdoers who these documents might, in fact, show did wrong things. So all the DA is doing is his normal law enforcement functions, and he should be allowed to do that. This case would be very different if these cases involved official presidential documents. But here's the thing. The Watergate case already tells us, even if they involved official presidential documents, they'd have to be turned over with the proviso. And let's be really on the ground here. If the president the president's lawyers receive 100 interrogatories, well, first of all, strike that. The president doesn't have to do anything here. These subpoenas are to the banks and his investment firm, tax firm. So he does no more work whether these subpoenas are granted or not. There is no reason why the president of the United States' private financial papers, if relevant to a crime, should not be able to be received by people investigating that, or the Congress, who is trying to figure out what do we do in the future about presidents who refuse to disclose their tax returns.
What is that thing that keeps going off? Are you getting emails? I keep hearing a bleep, a bloop, a blop.
Yes, I'm going to get rid of that right now.
Lynn was in demand.
Lynn was supposed to, wait a minute, I'm blaming my wife for this, sorry. She was supposed to fix that, but she didn't.
That's fine. I just don't want to hear anymore. And I have a few more questions, including what else you heard from the argument. What do you are
here's one interesting thing that
conclusions and whether or not Kavanaugh and Gorsuch had decided this case the moment they were appointed?
Well, Kavanaugh, yes, he's a toad. He was a toad today. Gorsuch, there's only one of two possibilities about Justice Gorsuch's performance today, and I sent this out on Twitter, and no one disagreed, and many people agreed. Only one of two possibilities. There's three, I guess. Either he's going to rule for Trump, or he wants the world to think he's going to rule for Trump, or today he was going to rule for Trump, but he might change his mind, and that's fair. Every question Gorsuch asked, almost every question he asked, suggested he was going to rule against Donald Trump, which is interesting. Justice Roberts was fair, asked questions on both sides. Thomas was a toad, as usual. Thomas talked, but was bad. Sotomayor was the smartest person today. And let me tell you why real quick.
Okay.
She focused more than anybody else on the distinction. And it's an important one, Pete. I worked for the President of the United States, the Department of Justice. I have you know what I did for them? Mostly is I handled document requests and said no. I am very sympathetic to the idea that the executive, I worked on Lockerbie, I worked on Iran-Contra, all involving documents. I am sympathetic to the idea that separation of powers requires the executive branch to have an autonomy and a separateness from Congress. That is important. But with Sotomayor and for the president to have his own unique place. But what Sotomayor said over and over today was this is not a case where the president is claiming executive privilege, which I claimed many times. This is not a case, on behalf of the president, this is not a case where the president is claiming state secrets, classified information, any of that stuff. This is a case involving his personal documents that predated his presidency. And she was like, why is this hard?
That are extremely relevant to ongoing investigations.
Yes, and her tone was exactly like your tone. What's the big deal here? Now, let me tell you what other people said, smart people that I respect. Clinton versus Jones should decide this case.
Yeah, one would think. And didn't Ruth Bader Ginsburg ask that right out front? How is that not the precedent, as we described earlier? How is it not? What is their defense?
I'm going to tell you. This won't surprise you. If the Supreme Court were a court of law, and if its justices were judges, this would be an easy case.
Right.
They are not a court of law, and they're not judges. So what is this really going to come down to? I think it's going to come down to, we know how Breyer was weird today. He asked questions that suggested he was having a hard time with this. But I think what it's going to come down to is, do Roberts and Gorsuch want to protect the president, or do they want to follow the rule of law? Now, let me tell you, Pete, in every case the Roberts court has ever decided, back to 2006, even when Kennedy was the swing vote from 2006 to 2018, Senator Whitehouse has made this argument in print and in front of the Supreme Court. And in this case, in a separate case, every time the Republican Party's interests are at stake, Roberts has voted for the Republican Party. Now, someone may say, wait a minute, Obamacare. And my response to that is, Obamacare was not a political case like this. It didn't involve elections or voters or process, things like that. And by the way, I think Roberts did vote for Republicans in the Obamacare case. That's a longer argument. But leaving that aside, forget Obamacare. In every other case involving Republican Party interests, he's voted for the Republican Party. Is he going to stop now? We'll see.
Well, this doesn't seem to be a difficult thing, not a complex one. Lower courts decided unanimously on this. The President of the United States.
Oh, hold on. There may have been a dissenting judge on the Court of Appeals panels, but the results were unanimous. Yes.
The President of the United States did some very shady things. We all know that before he was president. We need to know what he is tied up in. We need to know where the money came from, where his investments are. And, of course, the issue of his taxes, the fact that he refuses to be transparent about his taxes raises plenty of questions in the public's mind. This isn't partisan. I've said this over and over. This is not liberal. This is not conservative. Mayor, governor, president. We have to know. There are very few arguments that I can even imagine where we wouldn't need to know where your money is invested. You are taking taxpayer money and deciding what happens with it. What if you're invested in hydroxychloroquine? What if you're invested in black paint for for fences? What if you're invested in McDonald's that you're serving to the Super Bowl winner?
Hold on. Or what if, while governor of Arkansas, you took somebody's employment and screwed it up because they wouldn't give you a blowjob? I think the American people have a right to know about that happened before you were while you're president, which is exactly what the Supreme Court said.
Whatever happened before you were president, especially, it's a different argument as to the actions that you take while you are president.
Yes. And the court has said that. The court has said the president has absolute immunity while he's president from civil suit. But in the Nixon case, the court did say even the most confidential communications between the president and his top advisors need to be given to a judge for inspection if they're relevant to a criminal case. Now, in fairness, the court in that case did say we're not opining about congressional subpoenas and we're not opining about state subpoenas. So that's fair. But the rationale of that case would certainly apply. But it doesn't matter because these aren't presidential documents. These are Trump documents. And those are different things. Pete, hold on 1 second. If Monica Lewinsky had sued Clinton for like employment discrimination or assault or anything, maybe not assault, but any kind of official demotion while he was president because she refused his sexual advance, she couldn't do it. Absolute immunity. And the reason for that is we say when the president is in office, everything he does is part of his official duties, and we can't have him worried about lawsuits. But this case involves the man, not the president.
That being said, there could be congressional oversight for anything that the president does while in office by the House Oversight Committee.
There should be. Sure. Unless it's unduly harassing. And the lawyers today conceded, the lawyers for Congress and for the state and for New York conceded, well, the judges here, the trial court judges, the original judges, made a finding of no harassment. If they had made a finding of harassment, this would be a different case. Because, Pete, you and I can object to subpoenas if we say you're only doing this to harass us and for no legitimate law enforcement purpose.
Is that why you objected to my subpoena?
Exactly. It's why I'm not in jail today.
Well, this interview is over.
I'm sorry we couldn't do it live.
Well, I'm going to post as much of it as I can. I'm going to press end. Thank you very much, Eric Segall, at eSpinSegall on Twitter. Follow him for all of the best con law analysis. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay, there you go, Eric Segall. And I put that on YouTube. I'm going to try to post more of these interviews on YouTube. And I'm gaining subscribers without even posting stuff. So hopefully that'll take off once I start posting more. But please go subscribe. If you're on YouTube and you have a channel, you subscribe, go to youtube.com/standupwithpete. And you can watch the video of Eric and I chatting. And his audio is terrible, but we're going to get that fixed. I'm going to build that guy a home studio because he's joining me almost every week, and he's always a great guest, one of your favorites, but we got to make sure everything works technically so we can go live and take your questions and more. All right. Also, if you're a paid subscriber on Patreon, got a very special guest joining me this Thursday night just for subscribers. We'll do an interview, and we will take your questions, and a little hint, he's a historian. Okay, coming up. Now, one of my all-time favorites, a Howard Stern favorite. I learned about this guy by listening to Howard because he was always a big supporter of Howard Stern's, and Howard always respected him. He's the journalism professor at the Craig Newmark School of Journalism at the City University of New York. He is on Twitter at Jeff Jarvis. You got to check out his website. He's hosting all kinds of different interviews at buzzmachine.com. It's always a great conversation when you're having it with Jeff Jarvis. Here he is now, the great Jeff Jarvis. Very excited to have him back on the show. I'd have him on every single day if it were possible and I could find a way to.
I'm always excited to be with you, my friend.
Jeff Jarvis, last time we talked, we were talking about, and a lot of people love this conversation, the fact that journalists don't do a good job covering science. You have been doing a great job at buzzmachine.com, finding and talking to experts, virologists, epidemiologists, physician scientists. Do you think the media, do you think the mainstream is doing better at translating the science, or are we still having a hard time?
generally not great, I would still say. I mean, I just saw MSNBC. They did some kind of feature about a light up the nose, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you know who's going to be excited about that? I told you, you swallow a light bulb and it's all okay.
If you just eat a light bulb, I don't know why anybody's not talking. Could we just eat a light bulb? Is that a thing?
Yeah, you do
a light bright. What if you ate a light bright, an entire light bright, the thing with the pegs?
So you know how it's going to get misinterpreted. You know it's a problem. And then on the hearings, you heard Rand Paul talking about how people, telling Anthony Fauci, people on the other side. The other side of what? What's the other side of science? It's stupidity. It's ignorance. It's not left or freaking right.
How much of that questioning did you catch today with the United States Senate questioning experts, including Fauci?
A fair amount. What did you think?
I didn't catch too much of it. That's why I want to ask you. But what I did, a couple things I noticed is that wearing a mask is a partisan issue. Democrats wear masks and Republicans don't. At least, again, that was just one quick thing I saw. But all of the people that weren't wearing masks, at least by one report, were Republicans. And that's how is that a partisan thing?
It's utterly ridiculous. And I think it was Brian Williams who summed it up saying that COVID is a health issue to the left and an economic issue to the right, which is also just absurd.
Well, it's a false choice, right?
Of course it is. Yes.
Because if it's an economic issue, you want to make sure you do the right thing by the public health experts, or the economic issue gets far, far worse, not better.
You know, the other thing that struck me, Pete, was watching is I see Collins and Murkowski, and I think it's your fault. You could have voted to get rid of this. He's a murderer. You could have voted to get rid of him. You could have done something, but you didn't.
How do you say he's a murderer?
Because there are people who are needlessly dying. Simple put. We would not have the level of death if he'd gotten tested going, if he'd taken the action sooner, and he didn't, and he's still not. We still don't have the tests.
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting is that it's hard to follow, even if you follow the news pretty regularly, the numbers in terms of tests. And the president's spin and has continued to be, we've done and we are doing more tests than everywhere else. But that's not how it should be measured, right? A, it should be by per capita, number one. And B, it's about when you got those tests started. And I think C, how accurate they are. How am I doing?
Bingo. That came out today. In comparing our testing to Korea is ridiculous because Korea started earlier and had action out of it, and we didn't have it to start. The other problem is now they're trying to gaslight us about the death numbers. And this is really sick to do that. And in fact, we know that the numbers are way low. The important calculation here is, and I hate this phrase, excess mortality, right? The people who died over the average of death in the last 3 years. The Financial Times is doing an excellent job of that. Our number is not 80,000. Our number is surely well over 100,000.
Just to be clear, you just said we know the numbers are way low. What you mean by that is that the numbers are very high, but they are lower reported.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
The numbers that are reported as COVID are low. I mean, look at the case of the children where they didn't even know it was COVID related. And there's not, thank God, a huge number of deaths there, but there are deaths there and they weren't getting counted. And people are dying at home. They're not getting tested, but they're just presumed to have a heart attack or whatever. So the total toll of COVID on this nation is just appalling.
Then the official number that we're getting, around 80,000 as we speak, is low. The actual number is much higher. We just don't know.
Exactly.
There's no way that the actual number is lower, according to...
No way whatsoever. And so if you look at the excess mortality, not every one of those deaths is attributable to COVID, but basically if you look at the total number of deaths versus the average over the prior 3 years, pretty much a good bet that's COVID. And indeed, those excess mortality deaths are lower in some areas, like auto accidents, right, and homicide are down.
So, and we also heard, I think, Dr. Fauci say today that same thing, that the numbers are probably far higher than what we've seen, right? Didn't he say that? Okay.
Yes. Number of cases are far higher. Number of deaths are far higher. And the right is playing a game here, and they're gonna try to do propaganda on this and make this into some kind of oddly Obama conspiracy.
We've never talked about conspiracy theories, I don't think, you and I. I'm pretty obsessed with following them and reading books about them and the behaviors, and now confronting them.
What's your therapist think of that? About that?
My therapist thinks it's good for me to get my aggression out with these people because I let certain instances of sexism and racism go. I don't pick every single fight in my community or with the parent of a child my daughters dance with. I don't nail every single thing they say, but this one is a little bit different, not only because it potentially affects my family, but because it's death. It's life and death. And if you're out there spreading these conspiracy theories, my therapist thinks I have it's a good outlet for me to let those folks have it. He says just best to do over the phone and not in person.
So he wrote you a prescription for anger.
That's been written a long time ago, especially at any kind of injustice. But I wonder if there's any kind of journalism project that you've covered, that your colleagues cover, where you might chart and watch a film like some of these that are on YouTube that all of a sudden go viral. I don't even want to name the names, but there's one in particular that has gone very popular. I won't even name it. But does anybody follow the popularity and how quickly those spread? Because you can see it spread in your friends and kooky family members' Facebook and social media posts and phone calls and texts.
Somebody you should talk to, the few people you should talk to on the show.
Yeah.
One is Claire Wardle, who is the founder of First Draft. And First Draft she is my leader in all matters of disinformation. They follow these issues and they get newsrooms together to fact check and deal with that. Another one is Data and Society. Dana Boyd, brilliant researcher. They argue pretty strenuously that you should not debunk and talk about these things until they pass a point of critical mass, right? Until they're already bigger than you could make them by debunking them. If they're smaller than that, leave them the F alone because you're only playing into their hands. You're only their chump. Now, what we don't know is where is
that's
that
hard
line?
To do, by the way. Just it's hard to do as a member of the media to follow those rules because it's sensational. It's easy content, Jeff. It's easy content.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
But it's irresponsible.
So Dana has been out there, Dana Boyd at Data and Society, and she has asked media to practice what she calls strategic silence. And the journalists go just apeshit on her. That's not our job. Our job is to reveal everything. No, you're being used like chumps. And so there was a meeting where Claire said to the journalists, okay, call it responsible reporting then. Now, the problem is we don't know, not only do we not have a clear definition of where that line of critical mass is, neither do we know when things have really passed. We need to get more data out of the social networks, out of Google, Facebook, and Twitter to know, because they really know how viral something is. And indeed, if you talk to people at Facebook, it's not so much a matter of killing things that are wrong. It's killing things that are viral and wrong.
Yeah. I mean, what is that threshold?
We don't really know.
And it would seem that YouTube is the biggest culprit. There's been a lot of research on that because of the way the algorithms work and how you find those things and how quickly you can spread. It seems like, well, Facebook is bad and Twitter is not great and probably Instagram as well. And maybe I'm missing some. Seems like the YouTube videos are where it's at, and
that's
video in general.
Wisdom, but there's been other research that says that it's not as bad necessarily as you think, that the algorithm doesn't necessarily lead you down that path. The problem is researchers will go in and they will put in every possible bad thing you could imagine, and yes, it'll go farther. And is there work needed on the YouTube algorithm? Of course, sure.
How do you generally deal with it, Jeff? If you're talking to somebody who is spouting this horse shit conspiracy theories about how the virus started, who's behind it, the vaccine, the Bill Gates stuff. I mean, if someone wanted to engage you, would you even engage them, or is it not worth your time?
Luckily, it's not my job like it is yours. So no, I really don't. I just kind of give up on them. And I catch myself at a reflex moment where I say, is it worth it to go down this rabbit hole? And I generally say, no, it's not.
Who have you been talking to for Buzz Machine, where you post these things on Medium and YouTube? You've got a whole bunch of epidemiologists and virologists. Also, the guy who's the voice of the Steakums.
Now that's the important one. That's my good get. You're in the business. You do the show. I don't do interviews like this. But to get Nathan Alabak, the voice of Twitter for Steakums, was a major get. So I talked to him yesterday. So Steakums, if you don't know, I hope everybody knows, but Steakums is a frozen meat product. And people from outside of New York and Philadelphia don't often know about it. I grew up on it because it's the makings of cheesesteaks,
Yeah.
And so it's a product that's been around since I'm very old, since I was young, and it had kind of lost it's cool, like Taco Bell. And so Alabak works for a marketing company that does food stuff. And for the couple of years, he's been this smart voice of Steakums. Who would guess that Steakums is smart? Along comes COVID. And what fascinates me is so many other big brands ran away. They're forbidding their ads to appear next to COVID content, which is really amoral of them. And Steakums ran toward the crisis. And Nathan Alabak, as the Steakums Twitter account, talks about rationality, about just thinking smartly, about using facts. It's not controversial. It's just good stuff. And he's really wise. So I got to talk to him, and he calls himself a nerd, and he is. He was a songwriter. He got married. He needed to make a living. So he's now the voice of Steakums.
Well, I'm reading the Steakums Twitter feed, and this is so funny that we're talking about, I went from the conspiracy theories to the Steakums guy, and one of the tweets from Steakum, @steak_. When someone posts misinformation and you hesitate to engage because it's, quote, pointless to debate, remember that although you likely won't change their mind, you'll still have a chance to inform all of the people who see that post. Your voice matters. How about that?
He's so the reason I talked to him, believe it or not, is as a lesson to journalism students and journalists, because he's really good at conversing, which is what the world's all about now. It's what you do for a living.
Oh, yeah.
But it's what journalists don't understand how to do. And he talked to me about how he goes with Twitter. He goes in and he says that there's librarian Twitter and media Twitter and weird Twitter and all kinds of stan Twitters, fan Twitters, K-pop Twitters. And he goes in and he listens and he watches and he sees what attracts him, and then he enters in. That's a skill of knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to understand that, and then saying, what's the conversation need? What do you need to add to it? That's a skill that journalists should do. So there are lessons to be had from the Steakums guy for journalism.
And for sure. But I love that point that they made on Twitter, because if I'm arguing with someone on social media, say it's a Facebook thread or post, I may not convince the person who I'm arguing with. And even really more importantly, on the radio, I may definitely not convince the person. People will so often, why did you take that call? Why did you interview that person? You're not changing their mind. I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm trying to give other listeners and readers the opportunity to see the arguments, that there are a number of other ways to take this and to interpret this information and to use critical thinking. No, I'm not convincing that guy, but that wasn't the goal. I like it.
The important thing that you do too, my friend Pete, is that you also give the smart people ammunition.
How so?
Right? The next time they've got to deal with stupid Uncle Joe.
Yes.
Right. And he says something that we've all heard. Well, you've had to think through how to deal with Uncle Joe on the air, and they can copy you. That's helpful.
Yeah, and I've copied somebody else. I put it all together myself, but I do think these are worthy endeavors to have these arguments with folks in public. Definitely in public. That's the weird thing that a lot of people don't want to do. I, on the other hand, live for it. Okay, so let's get back to the media. And I was talking to Glenn Kirshner, who I'm sure you're familiar with, a former federal prosecutor, MSNBC legal analyst. He's launched a YouTube page. He's appearing on my podcast and a number of others because MSNBC is not really covering a lot of these other issues. And I wonder how you balance your coverage when you really have to pay attention to the most important story on the planet, a viral pandemic, but you have all these crimes being committed. You have Bill Barr's DOJ dismissing the charges against Flynn, not unlike what they did with Roger Stone. And these stories are very important to the health of our democracy, to the upcoming election. So much is going unreported or underreported because everything is focused on the pandemic. But I'm not sure what the argument against that is. How do you balance it out? Do you?
Well, it's funny. As the stories broke in the last couple of days, I saw Maya Wiley and Chuck Rosenberg on MSNBC, and I thought, long lost friends.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't seen you guys in a couple of months.
Taking cobwebs off themselves.
Yeah,
knocking the dust
to
off.
Have their voices back.
Sure, yeah.
It's bad news judgment, right? It doesn't have to be wall to wall. It's the chronic problem with cable is that if the other guy's doing it, we've got to do it. You could arrange these shows, and the evening shows do tend to do it. They bring back in politics, but we need more. We've got to cover Bill Barr more. The fact that the Supreme Court today was the public could listen, but there was no video, means that the hearing won. And there wasn't much of value that came out of the Senate hearing on COVID. That was important too. That's fine. But the effort to get Trump's corruption is a vital story, and it's not getting the coverage that it needs.
Right, and I'm glad that's what you're thinking. And again, we're just talking about cable news here, but I'm sure I think you told me this. It was like the San Jose Mercury repurposing sports journalists onto COVID and so on. There is all the resources in newsrooms, whatever's left, seem to be on public health and COVID-related reporting. But there are all kinds of other stories, of course, that are continuing to go undercovered, and it's just hard to know as an editor, I suppose, how to resource them.
So I read a post today on from the Institute of English Studies blog. Hey, listen to me trying to act like a professor.
Good Lord.
About what's called doom scrolling, which I hadn't heard of.
Doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling is what we do now is constantly scrolling through Twitter and scrolling through the news, and you're looking at all the doom and all the COVID, right? And we think this is something the social media invented. No, it was happening in World War I. Where the belief was that people were reading far too much of these newspapers. It was going to be absolutely awful to you. And it was a cruel eagerness for news tortured everybody, said the Saturday Review in 1915. As if pennies and halfpennies were coined in every household for the benefit of extra specials and midnight war finals. And my God, everybody's buried. This has to be unhealthy. And there was an issue of a journal about literature and medicine that had the belief that books were so bad for us, romances particularly. It was always very bad for women, by the way. And so this idea that media is terrible for us, this is all awful, goes way back.
Oh, that's really, really very important and interesting. Speaking of important and interesting, you've been talking, like I said, to a whole bunch of experts and epidemiologists. How much, if any, disagreement is there amongst expert epidemiologists about what is happening and in terms of what they're predicting could happen?
I see very little disagreement. I maintain, I'm going to plug it right now, my COVID Twitter list. If you go to bit.ly/COVID Twitter list, it's almost 600 epidemiologists, virologists, infectious diseases doctors, and so on. I comb through it, and when I see trouble with somebody, I'll take them off the list. I've probably taken a dozen people off the list out of 600 people. And that's not because any of them were really, really awful. It's mainly because there are a few who are publicity whores who want the clicks and get what irritates the doctors is sensationalism.
Sure.
It's what I do for a living, and journalists.
Sure.
It really pisses them off when people go overboard on this. And those are the folks to take off. There's one journalist they can't stand. There's one kind of epidemiologist they can't stand. And I find unanimity even about the people they don't like.
Yeah, that is often the case.
Because what's the great thing about scientists is the scientists will say always, this is what I know, and this is what I don't know, and this is what we need to know. And they might disagree about an interpretation, or they might disagree about how good a study is, but they don't tend to disagree about the direction of knowledge.
And there doesn't seem, is there a lot of disagreement on when a vaccine will be developed and ready to distribute?
The sobering thing I always see, Pete, is that the year and a half is wildly optimistic. The shortest time we've ever done it is 3 years? And there is a good chance that we won't have one. There'll never be one. And that God knows. I'm sick of myself sitting here. But I don't know what to do with my 3 million United miles. But I may be stuck here for a very long time as an old fart. We don't know. That's the thing that they do agree about is we do not know.
The other thing I've seen over the last, I think, 48 hours is that there have been pockets of reemergence of the virus in places that it seemed to have more under control. I want to say South Korea, Singapore, and even China.
Yes, but once they had it in enough control, then it becomes very easy to see how you then manage it, right? One person in the clubs in South Korea and Seoul, 58 people so far infected, 1,500 people had to be contact traced, but they could do it because it was small now. Wuhan, one old man. So I think they're going to test everyone in Wuhan. Would that we could do that. Would that we had a real leader.
How much of the testing or the shortage of testing do you attribute to a lack of leadership?
Absolutely that, right? The CDC messed it up. Trump has never brought in the Defense Production Act. We've never really pushed to figure out how to get testing. He throws out his little things and puts them on the table behind him and puts a big banner up, dear leader. But we do not have nearly enough testing. We should be testing. I mean, what I've learned in watching the scientists, right, is you prioritize. We should be testing all of our health workers regularly. We should be testing everybody in every old folks home, nursing home and old folks home. We should be testing essential workers like you. We should be testing if we are going to go back to schools, which worries me. But if we are, then we've got to test the teachers. We've got to test people. That's only because we have a shortage and a scarcity of tests. If we really could test everybody, we're spending $1 trillion, every other week to try to deal with the economy. If we spend $1 trillion to ramp up testing, that would not solve it, but it would make it more manageable.
And we have done this kind of thing so many times before as a country to overcome our issue and arguably more challenging things to produce. We're talking about tests here.
Tanks are hard.
Tanks and planes and weapon systems are, far more. I mean, it's crazy. People keep making that comparison about, masks versus, fighter jets. It's nuts. Okay. So, and then the other thing, of course, is tracing. Do you think we're going to see an American public that will allow themselves to be traced because of our issues with privacy?
And
our lack of trust with our government.
Somebody said on Twitter the other day, what's the new greeting? The handshake gone? And I said, it's the wave from a distance. Somebody said namaste. But I think the new greeting is going to be to hold up your phone and show that you have the app in it. I'm okay. And the app is not going to be perfect at all. You have to have human contact tracing. You must have that. But it will help because the API for the app, the interface for the app says that it will track when you're close to someone, thanks to Bluetooth, in 5-minute increments up to a half an hour. And what we're seeing in the latest numbers, there's a Muj Sevic is a infectious disease doctor who's brilliant. And she did a thread the other day, basically all the major studies we know now about transmission. And what's turning out is that casual transmission in a store really quickly, that's a hard way to get it.
Right.
But talking to people in a room for a long time, singing in a choir is really bad. The Concertgebouw choir just found out that they had a concert and people died because of that, because it's a lot of emission of viruses. I think that offices and schools will prove to be bad. Transit is bad. We know where it's bad. And I think that gives us some comfort to start to imagine that we can manage things better. But we're not going back anytime soon.
I worry so much about stand-up comedians, my friends who exclusively, make money doing stand-up. You think about that, Jeff. You're on stage, you're hovering over an audience. They're all in close packed together. I mean, the future of live comedy is, it's going to be very hard to socially distance and create the right dynamic for that. And, and that's just live comedy, live performance.
And by the way, I don't want no offense to you funny people, I don't want a front row seat anymore.
Oh, no doubt.
It's like every comedian is Gallagher now.
Oh, well, I think we're just going to on stage, especially for people like me who are high energy and loud and so on. Spittle. Yeah, no, there's going to be just like at the grocery store. I'm going to perform like the president behind a white, a clear sheet of plastic. I have to stay behind the plastic and you'll see the spittle.
So, by the way, one of the people I follow on my list has done research and argues in favor of face masks, of face shields.
The plastic shield?
The plastic shield over the mask.
Why?
Protect it is a better barrier to your spittle, and it is a better barrier from others toward you.
Can it come up under?
Yeah, well, in the airflow, yeah, but he says it's better.
If only listeners, I'll post this up for video. If only listeners could have seen Jeff and I gesticulating what the virus has to actually do to get under
the virus goes,
the mask, a cosine wave. Oh, that's interesting. And because, I would just say, as goofy as those look, they're more comfortable.
Yes, I ordered 2 of them last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, my wife is making fun of me, but we'll see.
Oh, I can't wait till you wear one on video.
But I wonder too, how does that work with? So somebody was suggesting doing that in a choir. I'm thinking it's not going to be great for the acoustics.
Oh, that's a really good point. That's a good point.
But as a teacher, as a comedian, you'd look. I mean, comedians want to look funny anyway.
Yeah. But you want to look cool too, and having a shield in front of your face.
Pretty bad.
And there's going to be some idiot that's going to think it works for welding too. Like, it doesn't protect sparks.
Right.
Fire. Oh yeah, the world we live in. And I also miss. You know what I miss?
What?
Faces. Like I miss seeing people's faces. And I'm not going to lie, I'll check out women and men. I'm like, that guy's a good looking guy, or that guy's weird looking, or whatever. Or that woman's a beautiful woman. Now I'm like, I think she's beautiful, but all I can see are her eyes.
So my wife had a few good theories about this. One, of course, is that eye makeup it goes up, but lipstick is a dying industry.
Oh, that's a great theory. Yeah.
The other theory she has that I quite like is that the major reason she thinks Trump won't wear a mask is because it'll rub off his man tan.
Your wife is brilliant. Both those theories
she absolutely is.
Are really interesting. I've never heard anybody.
I hadn't thought of that either. Yeah.
Yeah, a mask will smear his makeup or whatever that is. Will we ever find out what he?
We know what it is. It's called Brooklyn something.
How do we know? Is there like reporting?
Because I think somebody who did it, Trump's makeup.
Someone who applied it. Reported. I mean, I would seriously.
His favorite makeup might be.
Talk about
Washington Post did a story. One of the undocumented employees talked about how they had to order it, and it's he required keeping 2.5 boxes of Tic Tacs in his bedroom at all times, and Bronx Colors brand face makeup from Switzerland.
Wow! Yeah, I just found it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You too look like a pumpkin.
On one more tangent and random thing, the Trump president is forcing people to go back to work in meatpacking plants, and they're considered essential workers. Really interesting debate whether or not, meat is essential.
Bacon over democracy, yes.
Well, meat in general, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but is meat essential? Is that an essential food that you would have to, you need people in the fields picking fruit and vegetables?
You're looking at this, of course, from your communist, progressive, liberal, bleeding heart way on the basis of the perspective of the public. He's looking at it from the perspective of the pig farmer.
But right. And what's interesting, though, is that a lot of these folks are immigrants or even undocumented people, and he is just pushing them through, like one after the next, go in and die, next, go in and die.
So here's the question for you.
Yeah.
I think we've seen a shift on the right, obviously, of saying this isn't that bad, get back to work, blah, 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 blah. How much do you think that is the white supremacy of believing it's mainly getting the people of color, it's not getting us?
I've heard that a lot. I don't think it's accurate. I think people, I think that's true, but I don't think it's over-representative of people on the right. I think that it's more likely questioning science and conspiracy theorists actually not thinking that they can get sick, because when you see them gathering at that brunch place the other day, all white people and all probably Trump supporters, and who knows, I don't know if they're Trump supporters, but the point is when they say, well, it's not me that's going to be exposed, but then they go out in public themselves by choice.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're at brunch place or you're in a meatpacking, granted, you don't have to do it as often because it's not your work and you got money saved up and maybe you don't have to go back to work right away. But I don't know if they see it that differently. It's not going to affect me because I'm not on the front lines. I mean, I'm sure there's some of that, but I think
so. Here's another question for you, since you're the oracle of all wisdom. What made the difference?
Let me get my family down here. Go ahead.
Crochet that on your pillow. So
I can't crochet.
So now I forgot my question.
Oh, I'm the oracle of all wisdom. Let me ask you this.
You just erased it. Yeah.
Oh well, it'll come back, and then you can text me just before you go to bed. I don't know.
I think of you every night just before I go to bed.
I love to know that that's partly believable. I think, all right, well, what else was I going to ask you? I don't know, Jeff Jarvis. Any recommendations for media or shows? I finally caught up with the one show.
So here's I'm pissed. I'm pissed as hell. I never got to see Hamilton. Did you ever go see Hamilton?
Never saw it.
Never saw it. Want to see it.
Want to see it too.
Soundtrack. Want to see it.
Yep.
But it was just too big, right?
Yep.
Obviously, it's gone now. So Disney announced today that it's coming out as the movie, but it's coming out in July, 18 months earlier than planned. Hallelujah. In time for July 4. That's the good news. Wait for it. What's the bad news? It's on Disney Plus. I don't want to subscribe to Disney Plus.
Yeah, I think I might subscribe for a day for that.
I think that's what I'll do too.
But it is, when you say it's a movie, it's
of the stage.
Of the stage, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, great.
I can't wait.
I'm surprised that you never saw it. I always felt like I was the only one.
I'm a Bridge and Tunnel guy. How about Babylon Berlin? Have you watched that?
No, what's that?
It's the most expensive show ever made in Germany. Pre-World War II, Weimar, really great production value. It's subtitled, but it's really good.
I watched Waco. I don't watch much, but I watched Waco. And it made me think that if David Koresh could convince his followers to let him only have sex with their wives, they couldn't even have sex with their own wives. Wow. I started thinking, I wonder if Trump knocked on a big Trump supporter's door. I'm like, listen, I'm going to fuck your wife. And whether, honestly, I was wondering, what would they say?
You presume he's capable of having sex, which I doubt.
Oh, I hope you're right. It may be why he's so angry, which brings me to my final question, which is he's been going, I hate this that we say this because it doesn't sound accurate, but extra crazy.
Oh yeah, on
Twitter and with conspiracy theories and this Obamagate
and
horse
his press
shit
conferences
and his weird. Like, do you see anything different? And do we, as a public and as a media, just get so immune? So many of these tweets are so unbelievably outrageous. You could never believe that the president of the United States is saying them, and there's just a flood of them so regularly. What do we do?
The biggest failure of journalism today, I believe, is that we have not covered the story of Trump's insanity. He is insane. He is unstable. That is the real story. But because psychologists won't talk about it, because One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest were wacky about psychology, we have norms, which are not bad norms. But when this is the most important person in the country, we should be covering this. We're not.
The insanity leads to a lack, and maybe this is a good thing, but I don't think it is, a lack of any productivity from him, meaning he's just literally tweeting at times all day, hundreds of tweets, watching clearly a ton of television, has nothing on his calendar. And what he's not doing is leading. He's not having task force meetings on anything. He's not thinking and reading about important issues.
Are you kidding? I mean, the game is to avoid him and go around and see what can be done. When I was thinking about the vaccines, the tests today, it's not the governors, our God Cuomo saying that's not our job. And he's right. But I'm afraid that's what's going to take is for the states to gang up and do what the federal government's not doing. And
system is not set up for that, and these states are trying to recreate a system that by colluding with each other. It's a bad choice of words. Working with each other to create regional mini countries, because the federal government.
Read it, my friend Jay Rosen at New York University, journalism professor, wrote a post saying that there is no plan, and that's the point. We keep on presuming there's some plan. No, the plan is to have no plan.
That, I think, is the scariest true fact. There is not a country in the world that does not have a plan or arguing about plans and implementing plans. There is no other nation. Only the United States of America has no plan and no leadership. Really, that's not an exaggeration.
That's why I say it's murder.
Well, that's a great place to end. The professor. The man, Jeff Jarvis.
The Oracle.
The Oracle. Looking good as always. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. I really, really enjoyed talking to you.
As always, buddy. Namaste. There you go, Jeff Jarvis. Follow him on Twitter right now at Jeff Jarvis. If you're not on Twitter, go sign up for Twitter and follow him and say hello to him. Say, hi, Jeff. I heard you on Pete Dominic's podcast, because it always encourages people to come back when they know that you're listening and that you're giving them feedback. So say nice things to our guest at Eastman Siegel, at Jeff Jarvis. Okay, now I reached out and asked folks online on social media, and especially subscribers to the show, if they had lost anybody, a loved one, to conspiracy theories. And I don't mean death. I mean their brain has been snatched and they are no longer the person they knew growing up. And I had a bunch of folks get back to me. I reached out to a couple folks. I'll keep doing this and keep having this conversation. I want to learn more about it. There's a lot of journalists and psychologists and academics who study why people follow these theories and what you can do, if anything, about it to help them out of these cults, which is what I see it as in many ways. And I talked to Derek and I talked to Liam. Derek's a longtime listener. Liam is a guy who I used to work with at SiriusXM. I'm not going to give his last name because, out of respect for his sister, who we talk about, but just a great, great guy. And I want to introduce him to you here. He's also, after I left SiriusXM, we stayed in touch, and he's a subscriber to the podcast. He legitimately liked the show I was doing there and is supporting me and listening to the podcast. So when I put it out, he answered the call, and we had a really heartfelt, thoughtful conversation about his sister, who has really gone down a scary path. Here it is right now. All right, so joining me now to talk about what it's like to lose someone that you love, a family member, to all this crazy conspiracy shit, is a guy I used to work with at SiriusXM. Pretty much one of my favorite faces to see as I walked around the hallways. A guy with a tremendous amount of integrity, kindness, and intelligence, wit, knowledge, and I really, really like him. And there's a lot of people I miss, but I certainly miss seeing Liam. And I appreciate you doing this with me. You're now also a subscriber of my podcast, which is so fucking cool. And you've always been a huge supporter. You always were like legit, actually liked what I was doing on the radio. And I could tell because you also have a lot of integrity and can't hide it. So that always meant a lot to me.
I in my gig, it helped me to listen to as many different shows and channels just so I had the best understanding of everything that was on air. It's very easy to fall into your comfort zones of what you want to hear. And so I would jump around from channel to channel. And I remember coming across your show. I knew you from the comedy channels, obviously, but then listening to you on indie and then onwards, and it just gelled, like the chemistry and the conversation and the open-mindedness. It was a fun and smart listen, and I could always appreciate that.
Well, that always meant a lot to me, and I'm so glad that I still got you listening, even on the podcast. And so you heard me talking about this conspiracy stuff and reached out and told me that your younger sister has gone, unfortunately, down this path. And I don't know what path that is. We haven't talked about it. I don't know the specifics. I appreciate you reaching out, and I'm really sorry to hear it. I actually do. Is it weird to express condolences? I'm sorry that you lost a loved one to these crazy conspiracy theories. Is sympathy an inappropriate emotion? No,
I mean, for my parents especially, for me, it's a little weird. I don't feel I love my sister, but I don't feel like she reflects on me or I reflect on her. We're independent people. I also have deeper thoughts on how children reflect on parents or should or could or shouldn't. But my parents obviously are kind of old school and see their kids' attitudes and livelihoods kind of reflecting on them as parents. And so for them, I think they're often looking for that, or at least some kind of understanding or a pat on the back, because this thing has gotten so crazy. It's gotten kind of bananas.
So where do we begin, Liam?
Well, I mean, honestly, so my sister is a few years younger than me. She's in her early 30s now. She dated this guy on and off for a while, musician, and always a very smart guy, super hyper intelligent. And he has Lyme's disease, which comes up a ton in all conversations with her as a kind of difficult / a blame game almost for every problem that's come up in his life and then their lives together. Huh. But so they started dating. They lived together out here near us. We're having a hard go of it. Couldn't keep jobs. We're having trouble fitting in, as they say. Moved to Pennsylvania on a commune of sorts. At his suggestion, because they felt like he wanted to do some holistic therapy for his illness, bee venom and stuff, which I'm fully on board for. And then they just one day hit us up and were like, we're actually in Mexico now and we live here. And we will be in Mexico for the foreseeable future. And they've been producing conspiracy theory. He has specifically, but she's been helping conspiracy theory videos on the internet, like trying to show, Alex Jones chemtrail type stuff about what's going on in America and the world and the Illuminati and all that.
Wow. When she was growing up, did she show any signs of vulnerability to this type of stuff to try to kind of fit in, or, for even reasons of, good reasons, good intentions? I see an injustice and I want to correct that. What kind of person was she growing up, high school?
Hypersensitive, very empathetic. And I think just, again, my parents are very old school, so they had her held to a set of standards that she just never felt that she met. And so when she found someone who believed in her, in air quotes, who that she felt kind of saw her the way she wanted to be seen, she latched on wholeheartedly. And she and I used to have arguments all the time because she lived with my parents for an extended period of time, which is a normal thing to have happen. But whenever I would come over, she would get upset with me because I was living my life, working on my career, my family, and accuse me of abandoning them.
Wow.
And I think that she needed someone to latch onto, and she latched straight from my parents onto this guy, basically.
So you really think that you blame the influence, most of what she's been led to believe, on the man she's in a relationship with?
I think that she was susceptible to influence,
sure. Well,
and it just so happened to be this guy.
Right. What are the beliefs, Liam? What are some of the things that she has, said, and how have you in the past handled them? Do you confront her? Do you just roll your eyes? What do you do?
I mean, the fear in person, on the limited number of times that I've been able to see her since it's really blew up, it's less confrontation and more just trying to hear her out, putting the information that I have out there. But again, like, my parents are freaked out because she's gone. Like, they just think they're never going to see their daughter again. And so there's only so much, like, she doesn't have a phone down there. She's got internet. So she could just stop responding to emails and then we don't know where she is. So if I get into conflict, I feel like I'm not in a position to fight with her because it does nothing. And she could just cut us off, and then it would just it would devastate my parents beyond.
So yeah, it's interesting. So you, as I expected from you, you're a really thoughtful guy, and you're not going to put your own arguments or beliefs above what sounds like a tenuous relationship right now. You don't want to have a conflict with her, and that's interesting and thoughtful, because what I've been thinking about, and I got in this argument with this woman in my community about her conspiracy theories, and she really laid into me. She's like, you've done damage to me and my kid. And I was like, you know what? I don't care. Yeah. I don't care, because you're not, in this case, my sister. You're not, like, what you're doing is dangerous, and I don't have much of a relationship with you, and I'm not, I don't want any harm to be done to you, but what you're saying isn't just your views. It's dangerous for our community. So your sister, it's a different situation, and my heart goes out to you, and I respect the way that you're handling it. But what are some of the things that she thinks and believes and says?
I mean, it's chemtrails, it's military operations in America. I mean, it's there was the fires in California, how they were all being set to make way for the train lines that were going to then connect the state, and it's groupthink. She's very hopped up on this idea, which I think we all go through. If you're a thoughtful person, everyone kind of has this thing at some point where they're wondering, like, how smart am I? Like, am I thinking, I outthinking people, or are people just a lot smarter than me and I'm missing something? And I go through that to this day.
Yeah.
Like, and I think they've closed the circuit on the two of them and are convinced that they're seeing things that nobody else is seeing, and that they need everyone to open up their eyes and see the things the way they do. I think part of that, if I can just delve into that for a second,
Sure.
is like, it's easier to fall into that when you feel judged, when you feel forsaken, when you feel like less of a success. Like, he's a musician who is, to do any creative craft, anything, comedy, acting, music, whatever, you need to have some sort of an ego to put yourself in that position to begin with. And when that doesn't bear fruit, falling back on something else, whether it's going to work at a bank or finding a new angle to it, is how most people deal with it. And I think that some people, like, for that sort of ego, you think, well, maybe you don't understand my music because I'm just better than you, and I'm so far beyond you. And if I know music better than you, then what else do I know that's better than you? And my sister's an artist, and so she thinks the same kind of thing. It's like, you don't understand my art, and so maybe there's other stuff that you don't understand.
Wow, that is such a thoughtful, deep analysis, and I'm sure very accurate of a certain type of person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally get that. And artistry aside, I think there's a lot to what you said about performers. You know, you can't accept that you're not a success by certain measures, and then try something else. You can't.
Failure is so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I certainly get that intimately, personally myself. You know, after getting canned at Sirius XM, I was way down on myself. Like, how could you not be? And in a weird kind of way, no matter how confident you are, no matter how many people tell you how much they love you, if the boss doesn't, if the company doesn't, it's like, well, there must be something they know that I don't. I get it. I mean, I certainly do. But the success of this podcast has told me otherwise. No, but do you think that is there any overlap, at least with your sister, when it comes to religion or politics? Would you put her in any kind of category? I'm finding that a lot of the QAnon stuff is based in some crazy interpretations of Christianity and Satanist. And then obviously there's, in my opinion, a huge percentage of people who believe this stuff are kind of on the political right. Obviously, the President of the United States is a pretty big conspiracy theorist, or he will fan the flames of them just to get people riled up, especially if it makes him seemingly look good or heroic. So for your sister and your general thoughts, are there religious connections, political connections in any way?
Not as much. I mean, it's highly anti-government. It's a lot of that. He swears that everyone who's running the world are Satanists, and
wow.
But they don't have a religious affiliation themselves. They've just decided what the structure is that they're fighting against, or that they see that nobody else sees.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, but there's no religion. I mean, like they don't have a political affiliation. They don't trust either party or anybody. Yeah, that's part of. They keep saying that's why they left the country. Is they're just convinced that the American government is going to go on full lockdown, like 1984 kind of stuff. They're just like every post that I've seen is, here it comes. Here's the thing. They're always looking for the harbinger of like what's going to justify what they've been saying for the past year.
Reminds me of when I had an assignment from CNN to go out and interview those people. I don't know if you remember, like it was like maybe 2012, the Doomsday, the end of the world stuff.
Oh my God, yeah. Remember
that?
Yeah.
I went out and talked to those people that were like at in the Port Authority and Penn Station, or whatever, holding up signs, and I got to share this video. I got to send you this video because I was like, what if it's tomorrow? What if you don't die? He's like, we're gonna. It's all over. But what if you don't? He's like, we're gonna. And I just kept being like a child. I was like, but what if you don't? And it was really like rude of me, but entertaining. Anyway, what else can you tell? Is there anything else you can say? Do you think that the fever ever breaks? Do you think it's a lot having to do with like it? Certainly, and it's weird. And I do want to say that I talked to two people for this episode about it. They're both talking about females. I don't think it's a gender thing. I think that anybody is vulnerable to this, but it does seem that relationships, and I want to say that men sometimes, seem to, you think of like the David Koresh's or whatever, they try to control the women in their lives. But I'm just really talking out of my ass. I don't think there's any gender thing, but I guess I'm thinking in your sister's situation, if the relationship ends, does the fever break?
I mean, that's been the question. And I mean, my dad especially has been very much like, if this relationship needs to end so she can come back to reality. And I've pushed back. I get into more heated conversations with my parents over this stuff because I feel very strongly that even if this relationship ends, she is susceptible and of a mindset that she is going to make another, I don't want to say bad decision because I don't want to put myself on anything, but she's going to make another rash decision, extremist decision, unless like the underlying issues are dealt with.
Confidence issues or whatever, yeah.
And yeah, did you just say confidence?
Well, it's not, I mean, if she's going, what it sounds like you're saying, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, is she's going to find another person, mate, partner, man, who is going to provide the same kind of influence on her because she, for whatever reason, needs that. I'm psychoanalyzing a person I've never met. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. At least I agree with you, so I'm going to say you're right. But so that's what I keep saying to my parents is we should be taking this time, and they've been doing it now, especially. They actually flew down to Mexico right before the COVID thing happened and got to spend 2 or 3 days with her. And that was really good. Yeah, it was awesome. They didn't really see him much. They saw him about twice. They were there for 3 days and they saw him for 2 dinners. And he's wildly reclusive from everybody. He we'll do Zooms for holidays and he doesn't say hi. Like he's
can you please?
But again, it's the ego. It's like he can't engage with people because it puts everything that he stands for in question. You know,
well, I was about to end this conversation, but you saying that is another quality that I have noticed. And I was going to say, can you get him on the show? But my thing is, my experience is that these folks, what I've heard, again, this is just limited, they don't want to debate.
No, he doesn't want to dialogue at all. No. He doesn't want to talk. He doesn't want to engage. He doesn't want to converse about it. I'll give you one more story that is, I think, pretty wild. So we planned out, my parents are pushing 70 and I've got a 5-year-old daughter. We're all in good health. And before all this, I was like, while we can, let's go on a family vacation, let's go explore, let's go engage while everybody's in good health. And we got a little,
that's so thoughtful of you. And
so we all went to Ireland and we invited him and her. This is back this past summer, so it was just before they ran off to Mexico. They had already kind of headed out to Pennsylvania, and she agreed to come, and we had her ticket. He would not come, and we were paying for it. He then made her cancel the night before because he was convinced it was leading up to 4th of July, and he had saw signaling on the internet that there was going to be some massive disaster and that we couldn't get on the planes. So they went to my parents' house the night before and tried to convince them to not get on the plane. That didn't work. My sister ran off to Pennsylvania with him. My dad went and got her and brought her to Ireland, like convinced her, come with the family, you need to be with your family. And he stayed behind. But all of that is to say, like, he's got his messaging, his ideas, and there's no desire to have a conversation about it. The only conversation that happened was that night when my sister made him come to my parents' house and try to convince them to cancel their trip to Ireland. And it was under duress. He did not want to be there. And my parents sat with him for 2 hours and tried to talk through it and could not get through to him. What are you going to do in 2 hours with someone like that? But yeah, no, it's wild.
That is a crazy story. And my heart goes out to your dad and your mom. I mean, that is so tough. You think about your own 5-year-old daughter, and I think about my daughters and losing them to that. It's different than for you. It's your sister. But yeah, that's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, you talk on this a lot, and I appreciate it. You ask a lot of questions about being a parent, and I'm a few years behind you at this point. I mean, my daughter's 5, so I'm listening to what you've got going on with cell phone questions and whatnot, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to make a mental note of that for down the line, even though everything's going to be different in 5 years. But I will say that in looking at all of this, and I don't blame my parents for this. You can't know what you're doing in the moment, especially now as a parent. I look at it and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Sure. But I do look at this and say, there's probably times where they, and especially me as a brother, should have been there for her more. I don't want to get into shoulda, woulda, couldas, but there's
don't do that to yourself.
But there's the thought that, like, especially now with my daughter, I just want to listen even more. Like, I want to green light as much as I can within reason, just listen and engage. And if she comes up with an idea, I want her to feel heard. I want to explore it. Like, I'm afraid that, again, as a brother, I was a teenage kid and dismissive, and she didn't get the attention or the therapy or whatever it was that she needed, because my parents don't believe in that. Like, I think we all need to talk to people, and we all need to be heard. And I'm trying to take lessons that I'm seeing with my sister and apply it to now as a father. Because you're right, it is scary. It's
well, let me just say, I hate to hear you kind of have those regrets, and I understand. I mean, I would do the same thing, but I also think it's super important that you just shared them with me, and that anybody who listens to this will hear that and understand exactly what you've gone through and what you wish might be different, and take that and heed that warning and do what you feel like you didn't do, not that you could have possibly known. So you can't blame yourself, but people listening will say, maybe I should do just as you said. I can't nearly recreate how eloquent that thoughtfulness was. Well, good, man. I'm glad that you're thinking that way, and I really appreciate you sharing all of that with me. And, you don't really have to worry about your daughter. I mean, Bill Gates is going to microchip her, so she won't have to worry about the screen. It'll be internal. The screen thing isn't, it's going to be a new thing. Like, should we turn her on or not? How many hours a day? No, you're going to be just fine. And
I will say, home time, getting a little extra home time now has been
game changer.
Fantastic. It's stressful, but it's also like getting to take walks in a nature preserve with my daughter. Like, I never got to do that. This is amazing.
I know you well enough to know that you are, I'm sure, an exceptional father.
Well, thanks. Right back at you.
Thank you, Liam. Great to see you.
Thanks, Pete. Good to see you, man.
What a great guy he is. Supporting me here and always supporting me at SiriusXM. He's great to work with. Every time I saw his face, I smiled because I knew how much integrity he had. And my heart goes out to his family. And if you're someone who has lost somebody to a conspiracy theories, to the QAnons of the world, reach out to me. I'd love to discuss it with you on or off the air, learn a little bit more about it, which is exactly what I did with Derek as well. Longtime listener Derek, who lives out in Ohio. Again, not going to give the last name, but he lost his mom to this crazy shit a while back. Here's our conversation right now. Oh, I'm recording now, Derek. So if you could just, again, your social security number, phone number?
It is 125.
And PIN code?
It is 1234.
That doesn't seem very secure. I mean, that's probably the most obvious.
I just picked some numbers at random. They look good, so it was easy to remember. So that's what I went with.
Thank you for talking to me. Derek is, like I said, a longtime listener, and he's a subscriber to the podcast now, and a really smart, good guy. And I wanted to talk with I'm obsessed with and very concerned about conspiracy theories. And unfortunately, Derek's mom, a long time ago, I guess, went off the deep end. You guys haven't even talked in like a year. Is that right?
Yes, I have not talked to my mother in a year. The conspiracy thing was one factor in that. There's multiple other things that are associated with that, but yeah, that was a factor in things. Yes. So,
how would you categorize kind of your politics and your way of thinking about the world? I mean, you're an educated guy. You've got your MBA, and you're a smart, thoughtful, critical thinking guy. Is the impression I get from you? But how would you characterize your kind of your politics, your ideology, the way that you think about the world?
Well, as I'm an engineer, that's my trade. So data, numbers, just reality is what I'd like to try to ground myself in. I'm more of a policy person. I don't care about like the cutthroat left, right politics of things, but I want good policy. I've listened to your show since the POTUS days. I don't know how long that's been, since 2007. And
yeah, 9, 10, yeah.
So like, that's kind of helped shape a lot of my thinking by listening to experts, listening to people that know what they're talking about. And with my line of work, I have to do the same thing. I'm a subject matter expert. People come to me for information, and because they trust what I have to say. Same thing where when I interact with people, I need to know what type of information I'm receiving. So if I don't have a reliable source, or if the data is not presented in a way that makes sense, I'm going to keep digging until I find the data. And that's kind of how I approach politics.
Well, I love that answer. I love the policy before politics answer. And certainly that's always been the way that I've tried to think, that I've learned to think, that, find the people who study this stuff for a living, who practice it. In your case, if I wanted to know about the type of engineering that you did, I'd go to you. I'd talk to you about it. I don't know anything about it. Everything else is ego, that I know, and it's biased. But also there's a lot of spin. There's a lot of interest in having a certain outcome. But when it comes to, how far off the deep end someone like your mom, and sadly so many other Americans and people around the world have gone, what do you attribute it to her? I mean, your mom has a degree. She's what did you say, a dietitian before we started?
Yes. And so what happens is it's kind of like the frog and boiling water effect with a lot of conspiracy theories. And that's kind of why there's a lot of them popping up right now, is they see an opportunity to start indoctrinating people, start giving people a sense of that they know what the answer is. Because this is uncertain times, and people do not do well when there's uncertainty. So they want to grasp for answers, black and white answers in a gray world. So that's what conspiracy theories and some of this thinking kind of comes into play. So just to give you a background, my mom has been kind of dabbling on fringe thinking since probably about 2010. She was an Obama voter. She voted for Obama. And then probably about 2012, she started getting involved in, even before that, she was getting involved with essential oils and kind of looking at and going with holistic medicines and things like that. And
that's where it starts there for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it started there, and then eventually she started going down that rabbit hole where she got involved in the Iraqi dinar community, which I'm not sure how many of your listeners know about that scam, but what the Iraqi dinar scam is, basically they sell people to buy currency from Iraq with the hope of moving a decimal point and everyone becomes millionaires. So if you buy 1 million Iraqi dinar for like pennies on the dollar, eventually they're hoping that the decimal point moves and that money or that dollar now is equal to 1 dinar, and they're instant millionaires. The catch is, though, you can't do anything with that currency unless you go to Iraq to sell it. I actually met one of the people that was pumping this stuff. His name was Brad Hubner. He was he had a kind of a front business. He actually owned his office in the outfield of the Mudhen Stadium in Toledo. Been up there, had drinks there, but guy was basically thrown in jail for defrauding people.
Right.
And that was back, I think, in 2014. So I met the guy, and like, they meet secretly online on these little conversations, having all these notes, and the whole time is they're trying to dupe people like my mom into buying this currency. And she's got my family kind of bought some of this stuff, and my grandparents who were on a fixed income bought some of this dinar, and I always questioned her on it.
That's always, to me, that is the kind of the most pernicious and horrible type of person who would knowingly con someone, especially vulnerable people, older folks, out of their money. There's so many of these different kinds of scams. And it's hard to believe that people can sleep at night and do this kind of thing, make money by taking it fraudulently, conning people into some product or service that they know doesn't work. It's one thing if you really believe in what you're selling, but a lot of this case, what you're telling me is they know this is bullshit, and they're still trying to get people to buy it.
Some do. It's just like any pyramid scheme.
Good point.
There are some grifters that know what they're doing, and there's the people that go along with it. There's a whole Iraqi dinar community out there that you buy on these websites, and they will traffic back and forth all this secret information that's happening. But that dinar community sprung her into the whole Pizzagate phenomenon, which basically was happening around 2016, and was basically evolved around the Podesta emails that were released by WikiLeaks, saying that there was pedophilia taking place at Comet Ping Pong in Washington, D.C.
Right. And this whole pedophilia ring, there's a whole theme that we can talk about it. But how do you, do you have a thought or a theory on what type of person buys into this stuff? And more importantly, how does she go from selling the Iraqi currency or thinking that that's going to make money to the pedophile ring at a pizza shop with the Clintons? Like, how do you jump from one to the next?
Well, I forget. There's a Daily Beast article that actually talked about the dinar community in QAnon.
Okay.
And that was back in 2017. I'd have to find it, but
I'll find it.
She was in that before. And so it was kind of like this natural kind of progression. They start looking at these things and some things become more plausible. But with any conspiracy theory, the idea is that you want to know what's happening, be on the inside. Like that's the draw. Like, hey, I'm more important than I really am. I got this information. I want to be important. So I'm going to try to save the world. And that's kind of what drives my mom is she wants to help. It comes from an idea that she wants to help people and kind of save people. Like that's kind of been her whole thing. She wants to be the savior. She's got some narcissistic tendencies, and that's kind of where some of that comes from. She says she's got the answer, and that's what's driven her to this. So that's the push for a lot of these people, which I want to save people. I want to help people.
Well, I have that. You're describing me. So, like, what's the difference? Like, I have a little bit of that narcissism and wanting to do good and wanting to help and make the world a better place. But I don't want to do it, or I don't fall for these types of things. I found that Daily Beast article, I think by Will Sommer. Yeah. It is titled "Trump Fans Sink Savings into Iraqi Dinar Scam." Yeah. If that's what, maybe they've done multiple. I'll link to it in the show notes of this episode, Derek. But like, what's the difference between, well-meaning people, well-intentioned people who fall for the bullshit and the con and the rest of us who generally don't?
I think it's just the fact that some of us can discern what is actual bullshit and what it sounds to be true usually is. And so some people just can't.
So what
they want it to be true. So they use their cognitive biases to force things to be true.
But why would you want something like a pedophile ring to be true? Like, I wouldn't want it to be true that someone was that.
It's because they thought Hillary Clinton was an evil person, and they wanted to make, and the Democrats are evil, and they've been conditioned to feel that way. Like, yeah, my mom thought there was like 8 robotic Hillary Clintons walking around before the election.
She believed that?
Yes, she believed that.
Robotic.
Yes.
That's interesting, too, because, again, it's always interesting for me to hear these theories, Derek, and you, I'm sure, even more, because you've heard them all, because your immediate reaction to me is the most interesting. My immediate reaction is we don't have the technology to create human-looking robots, much as a Hillary Clinton-looking robot. Like, that technology does not exist. And if it did, it wouldn't be a secret. There would be no way to keep such a thing a secret, and you wouldn't want it to keep it. You'd sell the hell out of that robot, and we'd all be having sex with it. Maybe not the Hillary Clinton one, but whatever one you wanted.
Well, I mean, maybe someone would, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that would have that.
Hey, listen, I'm not judging anybody who wants to have sex with anybody. I'm just saying there's no such thing as a robot human. That's where I would start.
Yeah, and just like keeping it secret and the how and just the mechanics of how that would actually happen, how it have to work. People just are actually too incompetent to keep a secret. That's where I kind of fall into things.
Yeah, that I do as well. I mean, how many people would there need to be to keep the secret? And I just generally believe if it's more than 3, then forget about it. But
I mean, I work in manufacturing. You know how hard it is to have people do the same task over and over again and not deviate and make mistakes. It's next to impossible.
Oh, that's
why you have to put so many controls in place.
That's a great point. I never even thought about that. Yeah. It's hard to, it's impossible to keep doing, the same thing over and over and accurately and perfectly. So what about just the idea? What are your thoughts on, given that it's your mom and she's out there trying to save people, but you're trying to save your mom, I'm sure, or maybe you've given up at this point, but what efforts, arguments, tactics, or techniques at all worked? Did anything ever, when she would say something way, way out there, was there ever anything you could say or do that would make her walk it back, think about it?
No. She was so wrapped up in her work. Like, one Christmas, a cousin of mine is a medical assistant, so she's going to medical assistant school, and a family friend was finishing up his residency. and she was actually arguing them and my stepdad and my mom were actually arguing with them on how the body works. And I kind of chimed in, and I was like, well, listen to that. Like, they're the experts. No. They don't, you know what you're talking about. I saw, like, no, they do this. This is what they had to learn. And I tried multiple different tacks and nothing worked. So I was just called a know-it-all. I know nothing. I don't want to listen to reason. So I was the problem and not what they were peddling.
It's hard for me to not see that as arrogance. You know, the climate deniers know more than the scientists. Like, that's anybody who says they know more than the experts and they don't have a background. And even if they do, it seems arrogant. Is that the wrong way to think about it?
No, but if you try to push them on it, it's the same thing. And at this point, I just kind of gave up. I basically just said to myself, I can't waste my time with this anymore, especially when she got full blown QAnon, and she believes that JFK Jr. is still alive and they're going to fix the world. Yeah, there is a section of QAnon that feels that JFK Jr. never died. And he's worked with Donald Trump in secret to take down the global cabal.
Wow.
That's actually, yeah. So that WW1G, well, where we go hashtag that.
What is that?
It actually derived from a bell that was on John F. Kennedy's ship. There was an inscription, even though it's been proven that that's not the case. But that's what the lore is. That where we go one, where we will go all is from that I can't even say it right now, but where the hashtag that is in all the QAnon stuff, WW1G, WW8, whatever it is.
You sent me an image that your mom, I guess these are Christmas cards, you texted it to me.
Yeah.
And it's got that on it. And it's also got some other like kind of code on it as well. Here is WWG1WGA. Go look that up, folks, or don't.
Well, that's what, if someone has that as any sort of hashtag or any sort of thing in their handle or bio, just write them off. They've sunken down that QAnon well.
Right. So I got a billion questions, and I know you're not an expert and you're just telling me about your mom, but clearly
I've done my homework on this because I like
sound like it.
It makes me angry. I mean, I can't take all the credit. I've like the QAnon Anonymous podcast, the guys over there, Travis View, like has taught me a lot. Mike Rothschild on Twitter is another good resource on some of these conspiracy theories. Like those guys, I've learned from those guys, so I don't have to go into the depths of 8chan and 4chan and just see where this grows.
Have you had any correspondence with them?
Those guys?
Yeah.
Off and on. I mean, I like.
I wonder if you can reach out to him for me, but I'll reach out to him to get him on the show to talk to him because it sounds like they're doing really good work. So, Mike, so let me ask you about the overlap there. Again, this is anecdotal. I'm just beginning to kind of really dig into this. I've not been as interested in the past, mostly focused on the conspiracy theorists around climate change and so on. But this is really anti-vax driven and the pandemic. And so it's really led me to want to learn a lot more about it. But again, anecdotal, but there does seem to be an overlap with Christianity. A lot of times, your mom has Bible quotes. This guy in my community, he's the craziest anti-vaxxer I know. I'm familiar with it. He's got a lot of Bible quotes. How much have you noticed that Christianity, religion, specifically a certain kind of Christianity, there's an overlap there with the conspiracists?
It's huge because, well, especially, I'm just going to use QAnon as an example. It's huge because they believe they're fighting a ring of satanic pedophiles.
Satan, of course, is a Christian.
Yeah, a Christian enemy. I mean, even though what they're actually fighting is not really true in the whole biblical sense, but that's what they believe. They'll actually go out and find satanic images in Hollywood and things like that. There's a whole QAnon movie that came out called Out of Shadows that basically dwells on this. It was kind of like the toe in the water, kind of. They don't pull out all the crazy adrenochrome harvesting and killing of kids in there, but they want to point at the Satan images and make sure that you're a battle against good against evil, and that's where some of this using Christianity as a gateway into this world by just like basically hashed it onto the satanic images.
Is there any way? I mean, you say it's huge. Are the QAnon conspiracy type? Are they mostly Christian? Also,
I would say the fair amount are that because because again, one of the tenets of this is the whole the Satanist aspect of things.
Oh wow! What else does your mom? The other thing you told me that your dad is a pretty hardcore right winger, Fox News viewer.
He's normal. Like he's not like
your parents are divorced, and your dad, even though you don't necessarily, just because you're on the far right doesn't necessarily mean you believe in a lot of this crazy shit. I mean, you probably do believe in some of the anti-climate science stuff. They get fed that pretty well, pretty good diet of it.
But there's degrees of it, right? Like,
right.
And the way I look at it, even on the far left, there's degrees of that, especially on the anti-vax things. There's when you get into conspiracy theories, you're seeing the horseshoe effect in full display. Basically, the farthest left and the farthest right will intermingle and kind of become one big glob of just nuttiness.
I feel like the far left is most guilty of the kind of everything is collusion and to maintain power in the Democratic Party. I feel there's a lot of that type of stuff. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be, and maybe I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem to be as much anti-science stuff on the far left. There's some anti-vax and some GMO stuff that's screwy, but I don't know.
And I'm sure there's some alien people that are doing the same thing, but I mean, it's not as I would say it's not as it's different. The left-wing conspiracies that I've seen are different. It's not as, I think it's rooted in a different place, instead of like where on the QAnon side and the right-wing side, there's a lot of hate for your enemy and hate for taking people out, and like a lot of anti-Semitic tones on that are used as well, like the Rothschilds and the global cabal.
Has your mom ever trafficked in any of that stuff?
She's in yes, it's QAnon. Like that's some of she thinks there's a global cabal out there of the globalists who are going to take down the world and things of that nature.
Wow. The Bill Gates thing is also a tough thing to buy, that they think that he is somehow behind this, and for purposes of power and money, because he has more power and money than almost anybody in the world, and he spent the last. And I could criticize Bill Gates for a lot of different things, but he has spent a lot of his time and most of his money trying to solve worldwide diseases with vaccines that aren't making him money. He's giving away his money.
Yeah, but you don't realize, though, that he's also doing this for a reason. Like, he wants the vaccine to put chips into people so the government, the deep state, can track them. He's working with the deep state. You know that, Pete.
Right, I know, but then I would say, well, why would he want to do that? For what reason would he? Control. It's all about. But see, that's right. What you're doing when you're talking to conspiracy theorists, and that's kind of the other article I sent you. Just kind of talks about that too. How the anti-vaxxers, some of the anti-vax community, is using this as a gateway to start the red pilling is kind of the term for it. Red pilling people, get them further down the conspiracy well. Right. Oh, it's scary. Have you seen it again? I don't know how we really qualify this, but
I've been seeing a lot more with the anti-vax stuff just because of that. Like, there's like that pandemic movie that's just a bunch of garbage based on a woman who has absolutely no credibility.
Yeah, I watched the first 20 seconds of it, looked up this woman, and I was like, yeah, that's all I need. First 20 seconds. I had 6 questions. My cousin sent it to me. She's way out there on this stuff. And within the first 20 seconds, I stopped it. I texted her. I go, I have 6 questions based on what they said. In the first 20 seconds, what questions do you have about the claims that they're making? I'm constantly questioning people's claims. Like, what is that quality? Is it critical thinking? Is it curiosity? I don't know. But when I watched it, I immediately was like, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that happened. I wonder if it happened the way that they're saying it happened. I looked it up. It was pretty easy to look it up. And no, it was a lot of horse shit. She's dangerous. Yeah. She's a thief.
Well, they're basically trying to demonize. Again, a lot of this is rooted in the fact that COVID right now is an experience that no one else has had, and people are looking for answers.
Right.
So when you're in this void and people have this uncertainty, you have the crazy person over in the corner saying, "I got the answer for you." For enough people, that's enough to kind of say, "Oh, what is that?" And then kind of start going down that rabbit hole and start seeing what else is there. And this is why you're seeing that a lot of this thinking come to the forefront right now, and you're seeing a lot of this. I don't distrust the death numbers. There is
Right.
fake. Well, the president's putting that on there, but it's also coming from people that are also pushing this. So it's getting into that that sphere of influence and trying to push and drive that conversation. So of course the idiot in the White House is going to follow up on that.
Well, I think, yeah, that's probably I'll get your comment on this. Probably a good place to end our conversation for now, even though I want to keep having this with you and many others, which is this president has always been a conspiracy theorist. And some people might say, well, he doesn't really believe that stuff. Well, of course, it doesn't matter if he really believes it. If he's selling it, he's worse than the actual people who do. But he has shared and retweeted so many horrible things and defamed so many people. Obviously, he's got Obamagate going on now, just making stuff up. He doesn't care about the truth at all. He only cares about the narrative making him look good. So it's in his interest, and he's completely unprincipled to share any idea or thought with his minions. And it reminds me of John McCain being, asked a question when he was campaigning against Trump, and, the woman said he's an Arab. And John McCain said, no, he's not. He's a good person, which always insinuated like Arabs are good people. I'm Arab. But he pushed back on that rumor, that notion, and it probably didn't help him with Republicans, to be honest, but it wasn't true. Trump, on the other hand, will accept anything completely made up if it makes him look good or helps him. Do you think that's a fair characterization of his?
Yeah, but I'm going to expand on that. It's even worse than that. He actually will do the wink and the nod under the tone, because he knows that the White House is familiar with this stuff. They have to be, because they tell people at rallies to take off Q shirts. But he'll go and tweet QAnon accounts that are blatantly QAnon accounts, retweet them because they're making a good point about them. So he's doing a lot of wink and nod to that community, because he knows they're an avid a supportive base that he can kind of get riled up and kind of get them on his side.
Imagine trying to recruit those people to become supporters of yours, like reaching out, wanting those people to support you, and then even doing, the work to spread those horrible rumors and conspiracies, which is also what he's doing. Oof.
Exactly.
Oh, what an interesting time. What a crazy leader that we have during this pandemic, where all these conspiracies are coming to a head, and we're talking to someone like you that's had to deal with this and his family is really important. If you're listening and like Derek, you have a family member or friend or loved one that I phrase it this way. It's up to you though. That you lost to these conspiracy, like you've lost that person, that friend, that relative. Call me, email me, whatever. I want to interview you. But do you think that's fair that you lost this person?
That's what I say. I'd say I lost my mom to QAnon. I mean, that's really what happens. Like she basically she changed, and I know other people that have changed. I know I saw another article about a Reddit forum that's basically a support group for people that have lost loved ones to these conspiracy theories.
That's where I get my guests.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's all completely anonymous. So,
well, this was too. You're just Derek, but I know you. And a lot about you, and more than anything else, I really appreciate your support and our budding friendship, and we'll just keep talking about this and anything else you want, because you're a super smart guy. Thanks so much for your time today.
Hey, thanks, Pete.
All right. And also, thanks for your support, Derek, and your subscription. Really cool guy. Great talking to him, and tough situation. If you're somebody who has lost a relative, a loved one to these conspiracy theories, to these cults, if you will, I'd love to hear from you. So definitely reach out to me. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, or DM me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the way home. And this little piggy went to the market, and this little one I'm sorry. Okay, well, it's time to wrap this podcast up. Thank you very much to Eric Segall and to Jeff Jarvis, to Liam and Derek for their vulnerability and honesty with their personal situations. Those are very enlightening. And thank you to all of you for listening. A lot of you say, I said, who listens all the way to the end? I got a whole bunch of messages from people saying, I listen all the way to the end. Thank you guys. That's very cool. So if you're not already subscribing on Patreon with a paid subscription, you can do that right now. I'd appreciate it. Going at 5 days a week. Who would you like to hear? What would you like me to talk about? So many people making great ideas, great suggestions, great guests, great different stories to cover. So definitely reach out. You can be one of the producers of this show. All right, I'm out. Be good. Stay connected. You're not alone. I love you. Talk to you later.